Hi Bartonella buddies and fellow health-seeking humans. Before we jump into today's video, I wanted to make a disclaimer. There's a tendency by patients to label different symptoms by different pathogens. For example, a patient might say, today I'm having a Bartonella headache and yesterday I had a Lyme headache. And then they use this labeling to guide treatment. The problem with this approach is that the human body has a limited way of expressing illness and inflammation. And I've heard this argument from both Dr. Mozayeni and Dr. Elam. When I first heard this argument, I was pretty confused by it, and when my mom first heard this argument, she was confused by it too, because people with bartonellosis, etc., have sometimes literally dozens of symptoms. But if I could paraphrase what these bartonellosis experts mean when they say this, is that many symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, headache, are symptoms that could be due to bartonellosis, but also borreliosis and plenty of other pathogens, both known and unknown to doctors and scientists, and from non-infectious causes. So as I recount my symptoms to you and as I label them, I want you to keep in mind that I have absolutely no way to prove what symptom was coming from what illness or phenomenon. And it is possible that there is more than one cause for one symptom. For example, do I have interstitial cystitis because of recurrent UTIs, or is it because of MCAS? Or is it because I have a genetic predisposition to developing interstitial cystitis? Or is it because Bartonella makes one vulnerable to developing interstitial cystitis? Or is it a combination or all of the above, or none of them? Now that we've gotten those caveats out of the way, I've had allergies and food intolerances since childhood. I am lactose intolerant, and chicken, peanuts, and shellfish give me cramping, painful, explosive diarrhea. And none of these are true IgE-mediated allergies. Some tap water from some municipalities give me diarrhea, while other tap water from other municipalities don't. Ask any of my best friends, and I'm sure they can all tell you at least one explosive diarrhea story about me.
Don't ask me how many I could tell.
50? 100?
Easy.
I'm also extremely allergic to cats and other but we don't got all day. According to my MCAS allergist/immunologist, my childhood history appears to her as MCAS-E. She says, like Dr. Afrin in his book also says, that many MCAS patients can trace back symptoms all the way to childhood once their MCAS blossoms. That's a euphemism. More like explodes. My mom always used to call me her delicate flower, or she used to call me queen of benign ailments, and now, retrospectively, it seems like those jokes were in poor taste, am I right?
I'd like to consider myself clairvoyant.
Ah. As a child, I took a fair amount of gymnastics and dance classes, but not anything competitive, and I just remember often pulling a groin or tweaking an ankle. And by tweak an ankle, I mean pull the ligaments in my ankle. Looking back, I now attribute this to small blood vessel disease and lack of blood flow from bartonellosis. Oh, and I'm going to talk a lot about ischemia reperfusion injury in this video, so if that sounds like Greek to you, make sure to go back and watch my video on how bartonellosis causes symptoms, and I talk about ischemia reperfusion and how that plays into symptoms like foot pain. And I remember when I would jump down off of like a low concrete wall and I would be barefoot, and it wasn't a big jump, it was like 1 or 2 feet, I would get zinging nerve pain in my feet, and so maybe that's normal, but I do feel like that might have been one of my first signs of bartonellosis. Fast forward to age 16, and this was the first sign that I feel very confident was due to bartonellosis. I was on minocycline for my cystic acne for about 1.5 years, and actually I was on antibiotics for cystic acne for about 10 years starting at age 12, and I don't need any comments from the peanut gallery on how that might have not been the best thing for my health, because I now realize that, but also at the same time you have to realize that when I was 12, my middle school crush, because I had a cyst of acne on my nose, he called me Rudolph. I hope that young man has not aged gracefully. So at age 16, I started having pain in my hands and wrists, mostly from repetitive motions like typing, writing, texting, and giving old crushes the middle finger. I saw a hand specialist and he was useless, but boy was he hot. My mom always makes fun of me when we talk about that story because I turned bright red when he took my hands in his hands.
Well, he was sitting on one of those rolling stools, and he rolled right up to you, and you guys were touching knees to knees, and he was examining your hands, and you were absolutely dying.
My heart's beating fast right now.
Just thinking of it?
Where are ya? Are you single? I could use a doctor husband right about now.
I could use you having a doctor husband.
But I just called him useless.
Maybe you could find some uses for him. Oh!
You dirty bird! I then saw an occupational therapist and she recommended that I stop any non-essential medication. So I stopped the minocycline and my hand pain reduced by 50%, but it never reduced any more than that. So I managed the pain pretty much for 9 years with 600 milligrams of ibuprofen 2 to 3 times a day. But I just want to say that this shows how much we suffer and brush off. We're not psychosomatic. We spend years just saying, oh, that's normal, or oh, now I have this, or oh, now I have that. And then you realize that none of that was normal. I never understood why the hand pain came out with the minocycline until I asked Dr. Mozayeni. I remember looking up tendinitis and minocycline and nothing would come up, only stuff about the fluoroquinolone class of antibiotics and tendinitis. And I was like, oh, well, maybe the minocycline can do that too, and they just haven't found it out yet, but I'm never going to be able to prove it. I'm never going to get my settlement. But Dr. Mozayeni's hypothesis is that the minocycline killed off enough Bartonella to alert my immune system to the invader, but we know that minocycline alone is not an effective treatment for Bartonellosis. So it didn't treat the Bartonellosis, it just ticked off my immune system, and I think this is a pretty spot-on hypothesis. At age 18, I got my first deep tissue massage for my birthday and I absolutely loved it, but what I didn't love so much was that the next day I had severe pain in my hands. I could never understand why a deep tissue massage would feel good at the time and then make my tendinitis, self-diagnosed tendinitis, worse the next day. I now hypothesize that this was due to a low-grade ischemia reperfusion injury. So this is similar to the foot pain that some Bartonellosis patients experience. The pressure from the massage was limiting blood flow to the nerves, but it doesn't hurt at the time. When the blood flow is restored during reperfusion, this causes an inflammatory response that involves platelets, white blood cells, mast cells, and oxidative stress. So while the mild ischemia or ischemic portion, not sure which is correct there, is not painful, the reperfusion portion is. So next, at age 22, I was diagnosed with interstitial cystitis, also known as painful bladder syndrome. I actually am allergic to cockroaches.
Who's allergic to cockroaches?
Why would they test cockroaches?
Why would they test them?
And then when you think about it, they scratched me with a cockroach.
Disgusting.
The cause of interstitial cystitis is unknown and debated, and I wouldn't be surprised if there is more than one cause. Some scientists hypothesize that interstitial cystitis is due to chronic infections, and some have tied it to atypical infections like with mycoplasma and ureaplasma ureolyticum. I was diagnosed with IC shortly after being diagnosed with ureaplasma ureolyticum, and IC is increasingly becoming recognized as part of MCAS. So from the ages of 22 to 25, I had ass pain and foot pain that slowly crept in. Anytime I flew longer than 2 hours, I would have to bring a pillow to sit on, and I would just chalk this up to having a bony ass, which now I realize makes no freaking sense. I would tell my mom that my ass felt like a deflated volleyball or it felt like compressed memory foam, and then it would take about an hour or two for it to decompress and fill back out. This symptom, once again, has to do with blood flow. At the same time, I was becoming less and less able to wear heels. Now, once again, I don't need anything from the peanut gallery telling me that heels are bad for my feet, but I used to be able to wear them all night. Your girl liked to cut a rug. I could then only manage wearing the heels for about 3 hours before I started having pain, and then that was usually by the end of the night, and then I would start drinking more to mask the pain. Binge drinking to mask Bartonella foot pain. Once again, not the healthiest thing I've done. In the morning, it felt like someone had taken a baseball bat to them, and I would hobble around my room in London while I was in grad school. As As I say in my video on small blood vessel disease, I believe this pain is delayed due to reperfusion. So at age 24, my mom and I went to South America, me with my seat cushion in tow, and I got acute gastroenteritis, aka food poisoning. I had a fever, diarrhea, and I was completely down in bed for about 24 hours. After that trip, I could not eat and lie down or else I would get reflux, and I have not been able to eat and lie down since that trip. Once again, peanut gallery, we all know that eating and lying down is not the best hygiene for your digestive system, but it was definitely a bodily change, and my mom's 67 and she can still eat and lie down.
Yes, I can.
Don't rub it in. My mom wanted to tell this story to every new doctor that we saw, and I never wanted her to tell this story because I didn't think it was clinically relevant, but moreover, I didn't want to seem hyper-focused on every ailment or event in my life. Turns out I was wrong, and that's because Dr. Pimentel and his team at Cedars-Sinai have shown that most IBS is due to SIBO, and most SIBO is due to food poisoning. This event, I believe, was the start of my SIBO. Soon after that trip, I moved to LA, but within 2 months, I had to move back home because of the disabling pain in my feet, and while I was waiting for my mom to come and pick me up, I crawled around my apartment for 2 days. 2 months after I moved home, the pain spread all over my body to basically anywhere where there was pressure. I would have pain between my shoulder blades just from leaning against pillows, and this pain would radiate all the way down my arms and into my hands. I now understand that these nerve-like symptoms were due to blood flow. If blood is being impeded further upstream, so to speak, then I can have symptoms downstream, like in my hands. Another phenomenon that I only recently put together was reperfusion injury was my use of heating pads. Throughout my illness, I've used heating pants. Okay. Sometimes heating pads have helped my pain, but other times, paradoxically, they have hurt. There was a period of time where my mom was putting heating pads up my shirt and down my pants before I went to sleep, and she would leave, but then 15 minutes later I would call her back and say I need another dose of Valium because I have so much nerve pain. We then realized that this new pattern of me calling my mom back in for more Valium started when we started using the heating pads, so we stopped using the heating pads and the excess nerve pain went away. After realizing that pattern, it still took months to put it together that once again, that was reperfusion. At around the same time that the pain spread all over my body, I lost the ability to tolerate almost all medications and half of all foods. This was the beginning of my mast cell activation syndrome, and I think that the blowing up of the MCAS coincided with the spread of the pain all over my body because the MCAS was contributing to that increased pain. And this makes sense because mast cells abut nerves and they act as a liaison between your immune system and your nervous system. Then I stalled out for 2 years, and stalled out really isn't accurate. I'd say I declined, lost more weight, lost more food. It is unfortunate, to say the least, that my slightly positive SIBO numbers were not deemed particularly clinically relevant, because it turns out they were incredibly clinically relevant. My SIBO never manifested with typical SIBO symptoms like constipation and diarrhea. I definitely had extreme belching, but it mostly manifested as MCAS. The fact that the lion's share of my reactions were to things that went into my GI system should have been a clue that SIBO was a big driving factor in my MCAS. And then, it's now! Actually, recently I went through a terrible health crisis, but I'm putting that in a separate video, so stay tuned. If you're new to my channel, my name is Jake, and the best way to show support for my channel and my hard work is by hitting the like button, commenting, and sharing my video for engagement, and hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already, and by shopping my Bartonella Babe merch. 25% goes to Bartonella Research. And these are my social media handles to stay most up to date with my health journey. And just a little secret between you and me, I started making jewelry, so stay out on the lookout for that. I didn't make these though. No. Bye, Bartonella buddies! You're gonna get your teeth cleaned soon. You're gonna smell beautiful. Well, maybe not beautiful, but a little bit less like a rotting fish trash can sewage dump.
That's an accurate description.